Hey guys, for some reason I always remember when I'm covering perception, or your chapter is called Fundamental Behavior. When I'm talking about human perception, I remember my organizational behavior seminar reading list, and my professor had titles next to each section of readings. For every week we'd have a kind of a topic area, and then we'd have, 10 or 20 articles we'd have to read and come to our seminar class and discuss, and we'd be responsible for those in our comprehensive exams at the end of the program. And so we paid a lot of attention to that. And the topic for 1 week was perceptions are inherently flawed. And I've just said that so many times in my life as I've been teaching and thinking about perceptions. And I think that's so very true. There's a lot of academic empirical evidence that shows that. And your book really spends quite a bit of time talking about it as well. It's inherently flawed because there are a lot of fundamental errors that we make in our assessment of the world, the way we perceive it. One of the things that was fascinating to me, I was watching one of these nature shows or science shows, and they were talking about how the human eye actually only sees in HD right in the frontal area of where you're focusing your attention, wherever your eyes are pointed. So I'm looking at my phone camera right now, and so I really only see maybe 10% of what I can actually see is in HD. So my hands over here are not within that scope, so they're not in HD. But what your brain does, because it wants to make sense of the world and is a magnificent creation, is it fills in for what you're not actually actively seeing in your brain, and it seems like it's in high definition. Perceptions are inherently flawed in eyewitness testimony, and this was took a long time to come to this kind of conclusion. It took DNA evidence, really, and many different cases where there were extremely credible first-hand eyewitness testimony saying, I saw this crime perpetrated, and I saw this person perpetrating the crime, and I'm positive I saw the person clear as can be, only to have that ruling overturned and the individual exonerated from all charges when DNA evidence proved that it conclusively could not have been that person. So what do you do with this highly credible eyewitness testimony that no one is prepared to say that person was being in any way dishonest or misleading? They were just a good citizen swearing before God and man that this is what they saw. They saw this person, but they were wrong, and the evidence conclusively has determined that. Well, perceptions are flawed. What people think they see is not always what is actually there. The eye tricks you, the brain fills in information where it's not there, and we have to be very careful with that. So perceptions are just inherently dangerously flawed. So what do we do about that? Well, we should be aware of the most common ways in which we can misinterpret events, circumstances, things we see and hear, and be on guard for these kind of chronic mistakes that we as human beings make. So your book talks about a bunch of them. The halo effect, you're probably familiar with this. The halo is like an angel would have. The idea is that someone who has one very attractive or strong attribute, positive attribute like beauty or handsomeness or something, that you'd look at that person and that one attribute colors your view of the whole person. So they're beautiful or handsome, and then you think, well, they're probably smart and articulate and educated. Well, those things don't necessarily go together, do they? The converse of that is, the inverse of that is the horn effect. So instead of having a halo, they have the devil's horns. And so someone who's unattractive in some way in your assessment, then you would generalize, you would apply that same negativity about their looks or something about them and say, well, they must also be stupid. Now, when we say it out loud, it sounds stupid because we wouldn't do that on purpose. It's not something we'd walk around and say, well, that guy is fat, so he must also be stupid. That makes us sound stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But that doesn't mean that we don't engage in those kind of perceptual mistakes at some level throughout our day. We have to be careful about it to be unbiased. Selective perception, we perceive things the way we want to. We look for things that we want to look for. When I was in college for a long period of time, I bought a car in high school, and then I got it back from my family many years later. I'll save you the gory details. I'll probably talk about it later. But in the process of owning that vehicle, I discovered something quite unique to me at an early age. The car was a four-door pea green Pontiac Catalina, and it was the ugliest car. When I say it was pea green, it wasn't just pea green on the outside, it was pea green on the inside. The dash, the headliner, the knobs, there were a few black parts, but I mean, this car was green. The cloth interior, the carpet, it was pea green. It really couldn't have been an uglier color. And when I owned that car, because it was a $500 car with 28,000 miles on it, so it was a great deal, I thought, there's not another car in this world that is color schemed in pea green like this. But then as I drove down the road as an owner of a pea green car, I started to see them everywhere. I have a Camry XLE. That's the limited edition type. It's extra limited edition XLE. And it's some XLEs are pretty nice with the push to start and keyless entry and the leather nav system and the dual exhaust, the bigger engine and all that stuff. That's mine. Mine's pretty pimped out. And other XLEs don't have that stuff. The first thing you do is you have to see the badge. And then from there you can sort of look at the car and determine whether it's really pimped out like that. I've had this car for quite a long time. I love it. And I would drive around with my kids, and I got to the point with them that they could identify very quickly an XLE versus not XLE model, and whether it's a real XLE, whether it had the dual exhaust and all that stuff. How could we do that? Well, because we're owners of a Toyota Camry, we're intimately familiar with it, and so we could perceive of all the cars on the road. If you said, is that a BMW 325? I'd say, I don't know. It's a BMW, I think. I don't know which model it is. But if I owned a 325i, I could probably be pretty tuned in to the indicators that that's that particular model of car. So your background and past experiences really conditions the things that will perceive astutely and those that will go past you. Projection is the concept that we tend to think that people are like us. It's just an innate bias. Here's an example. When I watch the show Cops, which I have almost memorized, I've watched those so much, I watch someone getting convicted of something and going to jail, and I think, oh, that would just be the end of me. I would just be, that'd be horrible. To be caught stealing or some kind of crime would change my identity. It would just crush me. And I think that must be the experience that these people are having as they're running from the police and getting knocked over and getting handcuffed and hauled off to prison. But they don't seem like it's the same experience to them as it would feel like to me. And in fact, I think that's the case. I'm making an error in projecting myself onto them. They're not me. They didn't grow up the same way I do. They didn't have the same experiences. They don't have the same expectations from life. They don't have the same worldview as I do. So for them, for some people, unfortunately in our country, crime is a way of life. And it doesn't feel like the same violation it would feel like if I were to perpetrate it. And getting caught doesn't feel like the conviction that it would feel like for me. It doesn't make me better. It just makes me different. And I'm wise to recognize that people have very different responses to different circumstances than I would because of their backgrounds. First impression is obviously an error. Sometimes we judge people prematurely based on, sometimes because of some halo or horn effect. Other times we just get a feeling about them and we make a first judgment. The thing is about first impressions is that we can be right, of course. Sometimes people really believe in their first impressions, and that's okay. I think you can believe in your first impression as long as you allow someone to give you a second impression. Because sometimes what we hear and see or think we see and hear It's not what really happened. Or it was the person presenting themselves in a way that maybe wasn't their best. And would we want to go through life feeling like every time I meet someone, they make an initial judgment of me and then that's it? They won't change their view of me. No, of course, we want more leeway there. We want flexibility. So stereotyping is a natural occurrence. First impression is a natural occurrence, but one that we should avoid. Stereotyping, and then I'll end this. Stereotyping gets a bad rap because we think of stereotyping with discrimination. And of course, stereotyping can lead to discrimination, and discrimination is ever and always wrong. If you judge someone based on an attribute or characteristic that's trivial to who they are, then you're just foolish. Discrimination is foolish. Racism is just, it's ignorance. I'm not trying to get on some, I'm not trying to make a statement really about that, but it simply is. It's foolishness. It's ignorance. I'm embarrassed if any of my friends make any statements that even indicate, any kind of a prejudice like that. Because I think, why am I around them? They're stupid. Stereotyping, though, is not wrong. Stereotyping is all we're doing is ordering and structuring our world. Just like we can't see everything with our eyes, so we sort of need to fill it in with what we know should be there or what we saw there a few seconds ago, and now we've shifted our attention. As necessary. Our brain does that for us automatically. Stereotyping happens automatically too, and it's not a bad thing. We categorize people by even their skin color. I know that that's a sensitive area, but we do. We take whatever information is offered in our environment, and we say, well, let me create a schematic. Let me make a best judgment about this person, this circumstance, this environment. That's not bad. That helps us to thrive and survive. What's bad about it is if you believe your stereotype, your stereotypical architecture. You believe that initial stereotype, and you're not willing to look and perceive and evaluate this person or this circumstance fairly and openly without these stereotypical notions up and running. So stereotyping is a good way to organize information, a vast array of information we come across every day about people and events, and categorize it in ways that we can make sense of it until we can spend the time then to focus in and get more detailed and accurate information and apply that. Okay, thanks.